Welcome, everyone, to the Basic Income Show. I'm your host, Scott Santons, and my co hosts here are Josh Worth and Conrad Shaw. We'll be talking about the latest developments in the world of basic income.
This intro music is AI generated. Love it or hate it, no one was compensated. One more artist wonders where their money will come from. One more example of the need for basic income.
Was our theme song for this week. What'd you think of that one, guys?
I was kind of hoping for like a Christmas Carol-y kind of one, but that's okay. We'll let it go.
I should have thought of that. That would be a good idea.
Old jingle bell kind of thing.
That was fun. I've been watching non-Christmassy Christmas movies lately, so that kind of works. What was that one? It just came out. It was called Carry On. It was like an action film with Jason Bateman, but it happens on Christmas. It was really, let's call it inspired by Die Hard 2, I think. But yeah, it was kind of silly.
Yeah, the action Christmas movie is a thing that seems to be popping up, like Santa as the action hero.
We watched that the other night.
Justice.
Violent Night.
Yeah.
Is a little excessively gory,
Mm-hmm.
but fun enough. I think that guy's charming.
That always makes me think of what was being parodied in Scrooged, which is a movie that I watch every year. Like, remember, there's like, I think the movie within the movie is The Night the Reindeer Died. And like Lee Majors shows up in the North Pole to save Santa with like a minigun and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I think I just want to start off the conversation this week with the one everyone's talking about is the drone stuff going on. And they're just like, it's just all over the news, and people are just like, you've got UFO people in a craze claiming that there's orbs that are like the real news that's being hidden, and you've just got like thousands of people reporting, and everyone's wondering like what's going on, and it just seems to be like a real like example of kind of a mass hysteria thing going on.
Can you start from the very basic beginning premise? Because as soon as I saw anything about this, I kind of sniffed it out as like, ugh, it's another one of these things. So I'm totally ignorant on it. I know people are talking about it a lot.
Yeah, so this one just came out less than an hour ago. That kind of gets into this a bit, so we could just read through a little bit of it as a summary before we get into more stuff. So yeah, top line, the mysterious reports of drones dotting the skies over New Jersey and other northeastern states have sparked numerous conspiracy theories and misinformation as authorities investigate, with social media users and government officials alike baselessly speculating about foreign adversaries, aliens, and nuclear fallout, all of which the federal government says is false. Key facts. Pentagon Press Secretary Pat Ryder spoke to reporters on Monday and Tuesday, saying several claims about the reported drones were inaccurate, showing the government's investigation is holding its stance on the drones being harmless and largely misconstrued. Federal agencies investigating drone sightings, the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, the FAA, and the Defense Department released a joint statement on Monday, concluding nothing anomalous was identified after reviewing 5,000 tips for drone sightings, which have been reported in more than 6 states since mid-November. That same day, President-elect Donald Trump claimed without evidence that the U.S. military knows what the drones are, but isn't telling the public the truth. The president-elect receives intelligence, but declined to answer whether he received any about the drones, making him the latest public official sowing doubt over what authorities have said about the reported drones. And you've got other Trump supporters have voiced conspiracy theories about the drone sightings in recent days, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who posted Saturday that the government is in control of the drones, but federal officials have denied any involvement. Podcaster Joe Rogan, whose show often discusses conspiracy theories, shared a video Sunday on X of the CEO of a drone manufacturing firm claiming the drones are searching for a long-lost nuclear warhead, gas leaks, or radioactive material, saying he was genuinely concerned and called the federal drone response suspicious. Meanwhile, fake videos of drones have proliferated. One TikTok video has more than 10 million views on the platform and describes the featured silhouette of a flying spaceship-like object as an unidentified drone, alongside a near-hidden tag saying it's digitally created. Other posts with tags or references to the New Jersey sightings show seemingly doctored images that don't align with what officials have shared, such as a video on X showing a twirling lighted orb that has more than 18,000 likes, or a video with thousands of shares showing two alleged drones overlapping paths, which popular conspiracy debunker Mick West says is two planes.
Wait, so are there real pictures out there somewhere of things? Like, what kind of drones are these? Are these just like private, like people can just fly them around as a
Well,
hobby?
so
Are
that's
they
just
military?
it. Like people are arguing over what these are. You know, there's the most realistic interpretation, I think, like as far as the Occam's razor response to, you know, what this is that these are, you know, mostly planes that, you know, most people don't stare up at the sky every night, but now you've got all these people staring up at the sky looking for things, and they're just thinking that everything is some kind of one of these drones, even though it could be just a normal plane, or maybe it's like a satellite or a star or a planet,
So it's like blinking
or a
lights,
normal drone.
not seeing like full on aircraft. It's like seeing lights and being like, oh, that's a thing.
Right. Like most of these things are that. And you know, you've got people just just making up things and people confusing things. That's just like I gotten pretty crazy, I feel.
Why should anyone care about this? And what does it have to do with UBI?
Right. Yeah, so you've got just all sorts of conspiracy theories about, oh, they're spraying chemicals, like, oh, this is either drones from Iran, like, oh no, these are aliens, just like all sorts of stuff is out there.
Drones from Iran, like they boated them over, or they flew all the way from Iran.
Yeah, either one. And it's not even like really serious thought is being put into this either. You know, it's just, oh yeah, no, these are Iranian drones because
Feels like
Iran has
watching
drones.
reality TV. It's like the the addiction of the like sort of the train wreck. Everyone knows it's all bullshit, but that's fun.
Yeah. So, anyways, all of this stuff, it just made me think about a couple things in regards to basic income. And so here's what I always think about when it comes to this kind of thing. And this is like one of my favorite excerpts from Carl Sagan's book, The Demon Haunted World: Science is a Candle in the Dark, that came out in 1995. To this day, I consider it like one of the best, if not the best, book to help people gain a better critical thinking skills. He called it the baloney detection kit is something that's part of this book to help people detect just nonsense, using kind of a set of rules and stuff and guidelines. But here's this segment from the book. I have a foreboding of an America in my children's or grandchildren's time, when the United States is a service and information economy, when nearly all the key manufacturing industries have slipped away to other countries, when awesome technological powers are in their hands of a very few, and no one representing the public interest can grasp the issues, when the people have lost the ability to set their own agendas or knowledgeably question those in authority, when clutching our crystals and nervously consulting our horoscopes, our critical faculties in decline, unable to distinguish between what feels good and what's true, we slide almost without noticing back into superstition and darkness. The dumbing down of America is most evident in the slow decay of substantive content in the enormously influential media, the 30-second sound bites now down to 10 seconds or less, lowest common denominator programming, credulous presentations on pseudoscience and superstition, but especially a kind of celebration of ignorance. And so to tie this to basic income, I think we may have talked about this before. I don't remember for sure. It may have been like a space instead of a basic income show episode. But this is a paper called Belief Traps: Tackling the Inertia of Harmful Beliefs. I'll read both the abstract and the significance section. So beliefs are a key element of healthy cognition, yet overly rigid beliefs are the basis of societal problems, including prejudices, psychiatric disorders, and conspiracy theories. Recent findings from neurobiology, psychiatry, and social sciences show how resilience of beliefs is boosted by stressful conditions. This implies the possibility of self-propelled societal deterioration, where rigid beliefs harm the quality of personal and political decisions, evoking more stressful conditions that further rigidify beliefs. Measures reducing social stress, including economic policies such as universal basic income, may be the most effective ways to counteract this vicious cycle. And so here's the abstract. Beliefs can be highly resilient in the sense that they are not easily abandoned in the face of counter evidence. This has the advantage of guiding consistent behavior and judgments, but may also have destructive consequences for individuals, nature, and society. For instance, pathological beliefs can sustain psychiatric disorders. The beliefs that rhinoceros horn as an aphrodisiac may drive a species extinct. Beliefs about gender or race may fuel discrimination, and belief in conspiracy theories can undermine democracy. Here we present a unifying framework of how self-amplifying feedbacks shape the inertia of beliefs on levels ranging from neural networks to social systems. Sustained exposure to counter evidence can destabilize rigid beliefs, but requires organized rational override, as in cognitive behavioral therapy for pathological beliefs or institutional control of discrimination to reduce racial biases. Black and white thinking is a major risk factor for the formation of resilient beliefs associated with psychiatric disorders, as well as prejudices and conspiracy thinking. Such dichotomous thinking is characteristic of a lack of cognitive resources, which may be exacerbated by stress. This could help explain why conspiracy thinking and psychiatric disorders tend to peak during crises. A corollary is that addressing social factors such as poverty, social cleavage, and lack of education may be the most effective way to prevent the emergence of rigid beliefs, and thus of problems ranging from psychiatric disorders to prejudices, conspiracy theories, and post-truth politics.
There's two things I wanted to point out that I noticed. One in the significance thing was they called it a universal base income, which might actually solve a lot of misunderstanding problems people have. Like when you do basic, they think it means basic needs, which a lot of people use it as, whereas base sort of implies it's just a starting floor. So that already caught my attention. I hadn't seen that presented that much before, so I kind of like that. The other one was, it said lack of cognitive resources, which is an interesting phrase because I think a lot of people will jump to the assumption that it means, like you're saying, people are stupid. But what it means to me is people don't have the bandwidth. And I think they even said something about bandwidth there. Is like you actually, every single one of us becomes more stupid or unable to like think clearly and rationally when we're up against it. You know, like when we're strapped for cash or time or like there's something urgent happening, we're all dumber. Like I know, like when I'm flustered, I'm dumber. And so I think that's where it ties to this idea of a universal basic income, freeing up these cognitive resources for everybody so that we can all be less susceptible to these sort of conspiracy theory type things and belief rigidity and doubling down. Like we can be more open to new ideas when we're not threatened.
Yeah, resources are resources, and whether they're cognitive, whether they're financial, you have a finite amount of stuff you're working with within your brain, within your family, within yourself, and your own like financial situation. So like,
and your hours in the day.
Right. Yeah. Hours of the day, you limit one of those, and then the other ones also have to compensate for it. So.
Yeah, the explanation that I like to think about it as is apps running in the background. You know, it's like we all know what it's like when you've got some resource intensive program running on like your phone or your computer or whatever, and like it kind of slows down the whole system, and you try to like run something else, and then like that's really slow. And yeah, that's what's happening. And there's even like there's a couple of cool studies where they compare it to a loss of IQ of 13 points, where you can experimentally artificially run like a scarcity program in someone's brain, like thinking about if they can pay the bills and stuff, and then that actually impacts their IQ. And there's three comparisons where it's identical to like a loss of 13 IQ points, or it's like being like drunk versus sober, or it's like being having a good night's sleep versus like having a really poor night's sleep or no sleep. Like each of those things you can, results in a certain like reduced capacity. And that's what I think is going on, is, just so many people are operating at a reduced capacity because of just financial constraints and concerns and worries and stuff. And this drone stuff is like it's tied to that in a way that people don't usually like think
Yeah.
about that.
I know for me personally, it's like years of like stuff getting added to my plate in terms of projects that were like we weren't finding lights at the end of the tunnel. Like things were just mounting, and like we didn't have the resources financially or connections wise or whatever to like start knocking them off the plate. And I know the feeling of it just building up and building up. And not only does there become less and less room on the plate when you're mounting stuff off, but the awareness of that causes just general anxiety and panic, which makes you even worse at addressing all the things. And then like we did some announcements recently about how we got some funding and we were moving forward on the projects and like finishing up a couple different things. And as those things happened, like I personally feel like I can be more centered and on top of my shit. And that's kind of the experience I've had from the other side of witnessing people like years of fundraising and all these like summits and things of like wealthy people who talk about, oh, meditation gave me all my wealth and all, and I'm centered because I do yoga. And it's like, no, you do yoga and get centered because you have the bandwidth to do it. Like all these people
Mhm.
with their fucking mantras and stuff have forgotten or have never known what it's like to have your plate heaping with shit that you don't even have the resources to handle. And so it always rings hollow for me when people are like, this is my way to approach the world. And here's the 10 rules for like, here's what successful people do. It's like, first, have money, like hire a nanny. That all of a sudden your life is half as hard to do all the other things you're trying to do.
Yeah, in UX design, you talk a lot about cognitive load. So you're really trying to reduce the amount of thinking somebody has to do while they're using your app or your website, whatever. Right? So the less input you have, or the less sort of distractions you have while using an app, the better, right? And we all know this. Like the simpler your interface is, the easier it is to use. So like that cognitive load is being taxed constantly when you're thinking about how to pay bills and how to, like, I think the amount of space our brain allocates to figuring out how to just like make it to the next meal is pretty
Mhm.
massive. And like if that's a struggle, if that's what you're thinking about, then everything else just is kind of going down
Well, and in that
And
it
there's
context,
means
we're
nothing.
adding all these burdens to people in that space already and saying, here's a bunch of extra work to prove that you're in this place, right? I think this is actually a nice segue to that onion thing where it's like,
okay.
here's some extra cognitive load for you in the middle of being totally overwhelmed. Is like fill out all this paperwork and prove you're this, and then keep checking in, and um, it's exact wrong thing to do. Yeah, Scott shared this with me before.
Yeah, so we can. I do want to cover a little bit more about the cognitive burden stuff, but yeah, we can just get right to the, because it's funny and we can always get back to it. But
We don't have to spend time on it. It's just a good diversion.
yeah, so yeah, so here's the headline, and then Conrad can actually read the short like paragraph from the Onion. But I got a real kick out of this. New law requires SNAP recipients to balance food on nose until receiving command to eat it.
Washington, as part of an effort to ensure the benefits were only allocated to those in true need, a new federal law went into effect Thursday requiring all Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program recipients to balance food on their nose until they receive the command to eat it. There's no reason why working age, able bodied food stamp recipients can't show us that they're very good boys, said House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican, Louisiana, who demonstrated how the new SNAP requirement would work by carefully placing a block of cheddar cheese onto a constituent's nose before backing away and holding out an open palm. For far too long, the welfare system has been abused by SNAP recipients not willing to wait. We want to see nice SNAP recipients, obedient SNAP recipients. Only then can they get their treat. At press time, sources confirmed more than an hour had passed, and Johnson still hadn't given his constituent the command. That's funny. There was a. That just reminds me of a friend recently. Like They were training their dog to wait, and they forgot, and it just broke my heart because like 4 hours later, this dog is still staring at the treat, and they're like, "Oh my god, eat it!"
Yeah, and the thing I really got a kick out of with that onion piece too is we hear so often you'll have like usually those on the right are saying we should replace SNAP with basic income, and you have people on the left saying no, basic income should be additional to SNAP. And I think like this is gets cuts to the truth of it, saying that look, like SNAP is a highly paternalistic program, and it would be better to replace SNAP with basic income for reasons like this. Like it is just the amount of hoops that people have to jump through in order to get it, and the way that people are treated, and like the limits on it, like how you can't buy hot prepared food with your SNAP. Like let's just cut out that nonsense and make sure that people have a universal basic income.
And you have to go through a shitload of procedures and paperwork to even start to get it, which is why it misses most people to begin with. Yeah, if there's one thing that would be very beneficial to disabuse the left of, is this idea that we have to pretend that welfare as we know it is good. Like welfare sucks. And the problem with the right is that they're like, yeah, welfare sucks, which they're right about. Let's just get rid of it and not do anything for anybody. Right. And the left is like, no, welfare is great. It's like, no, welfare sucks. Yes, we should come to agreement on that.
Yeah.
Then the healing can begin, because we have to propose something better. And when you actually say, yeah, UBI should replace a lot of welfare, because it removes all of these disincentives and toxic structures that the right, like, rightly complains about, then maybe we can actually do something positive. We just have to stop clutching our pearls about getting rid of a program that actually sucks and actually hurts people, and focus on how do we replace it.
Yeah. Yeah, and to get back, I just wanted to mention too, when it comes to the belief traps paper, I just want to say that like so part of like the explanation, like as to why that there's that cognitive burden and that scarcity, the impact on people's thinking. It's not only poverty, which is also like why basic income is so effective, is because you can have enough money to pay your bills, but you can still be like worrying about it, because it's insecure. Like you may lose your job at any point, something may happen at any point, and then even though you have enough money, you're just constantly worried about that. So basic income, by providing that floor underneath everybody, then you always know that floor is there, and then you don't only like help people who are below the poverty line, but you're also helping people who have enough but are worried, and that they have that cognitive burden happening because of that concern. And the reason that cognitive burden happens is because when you're thinking about that and you're taking up those resources, then your mind, your brain does this kind of automatic kind of cheat code thing where you just try to find the simplest explanation for things, because you just don't have the capacity to like really handle complexity. So, you're not thinking about like these really complex structures. You're thinking, all right, like what conspiracy theory is super simple that just makes this make sense to me? And boom, you grasp it and it makes sense to you. And now you're stuck in this belief trap conspiracy. And the only way to get out of it, of this like really simplified, oversimplistic thinking, is to be able to handle complexity. And you can't do that as long as you're continuing to be burdened.
Yeah, that thing that I forget what the term was that was used in the abstract you read, but it was something about like a override, where you have to use a conscious override of weird beliefs and weird explanations that you're coming up with in order to sort of bypass that kind of thinking. And I think that kind of like doing that override is actually pretty hard. Like there's a lot of work, that a lot of cognitive resources that are necessary to even be able to do that. Like to sit here and like read a paper about or explore some of the like more rigorous research on these topics actually is not easy. Like you have to sort of concentrate and spend some time on it. And if you don't have the time for it, then it's like, yeah, why bother?
Yeah,
like, give me the more fun, interesting explanation, and
quick.
Yeah,
you're so invested in fighting your other battles that are
right,
much more urgent in terms of your personal life, like feeding your kids, that you don't have time to take on an extra one. There was something you said, Scott, that like is good to point out. Like it's not just an issue for like the very lower classes. Scarcity and income insecurity is sort of a trickle up phenomenon where the existence of zero hits everybody. where if you're at the bottom, it's like you have zero, so you're struggling. But if you're in the middle class, we still have this this fear of, what happens in retirement. All these articles like you need $5 million to like survive retirement and not be a burden on your children. And it's like we're thinking about that from like middle school, where people are like, all right, stop saying you're going to be a superhero. You need to get serious about being a lawyer or whatever early on. And like, even I know my parents were like just doing fine, like middle class. And they're at a place where they have pensions and stuff because they are old enough for that to still exist for them. And compared to most of the country, they're fine, but they're still like, well, what if we live 20 years longer than we're supposed to? We don't want to be a burden on our kids. Or like, what if we have this medical thing that screws us over? There's all these forms of insecurity where you can fall to absolute destitution. And that trickles well up into the upper middle classes. And then you're worried about your kids. Like there's all this focus on taking as much as for yourself as possible now. And I think that even trickles up into the upper classes, because then you're comparing yourselves to people. And like now all of a sudden, the way you show your worth in the world is how far away from that sort of insecurity you can be. Now success means comfort. Whereas if we make sure everyone's okay and that insecurity, that zero doesn't exist at the bottom, then no one's afraid of dropping into it. No, because no one's in it. And then all of a sudden we start measuring ourselves maybe more on like, what are you doing in life? Like, rather than like, how much are you outside of that disaster zone? Like that's like our only metric for success in the world right now because of it.
Yeah. It's interesting to think how insecurity can help drive inequality, where that existence of zero instead of a non-zero floor means that, someone is worried about not having, $3 million or something saved up for retirement. And because of that, even if they're earning well, they're always trying to do whatever they can in order to increase their own incomes. So you've got people in like the top 10%, looking to, I need more and more money. I need tax cuts. Like I need
Yeah.
more and more because I have to make sure that I have enough. And so if you make sure that people have that security, then maybe that can even reduce this drive for higher and higher inequality, because people would be like, oh, I'm going to be okay at least. Like I don't have to fear to the degree that I am now, in
My
which case
house
maybe
doesn't
I
have
don't
to-
have to.
My house doesn't have to accrue exponential value forever for me to have a safety cushion, all the NIMBYism and all that stuff, where it's like, I got to get mine first. Like this is taking everyone in society into a headspace that's selfish rather than for the greater good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the whole idea of like eliminating the zero is pretty important. Like I think, but then you hear other people say like, won't, if we make $1,000 a month, something that everybody gets, won't that just be the new zero? Talk about that.
Yeah, there's a relative and absolute, which there's a part of it where it's like, I do think things will re-equilibrate, and it won't be so predictable as in like everything just goes up by 1,000. But some people might be able to take enjoyable jobs for less, so that might get cheaper. If you're doing community theater, we might be able to lax up on the rules that prevented me from being able to do community theater with my friends. But if you're doing you might have to pay more for someone to be your janitor, right? Or clean up your bathrooms. And things might change in terms of expenses. And it gets complicated when you need regulations to like make sure, land and apartments and living spaces aren't all speculated away. But at the same time, zero is different than something always. Like $1,000 a month, even if it's like relatively reduced, is not zero. $1,000 a month will always buy something. Maybe it isn't what you set it out to be. Maybe it's like if you introduce $1,000 a month and then there's some inflation and then it's really equivalent to $700 a month. It's still $700 a month. It can't be the new zero, because zero gets you nothing, whereas something gets you something. It's just a mathematical
because
truth.
numerically zero still exists on the number line. So
Yeah.
so when you're coming up with prices for stuff, that's still going to be there, right? Like
Right.
it's
So you'll always have something. That's the idea. And like the question is it enough or whatever is an endless debate, and we can always be calibrating that and figuring out where the right level is. But not zero is like a mathematical, it's like a binary. Is it zero
But
or
I'm
is
just
it something?
I'm trying to really think through that argument. Like, could $1,000 become zero? Like, is it
Yeah.
mathematically possible? Like, so that
And
the like $1,000 is now the starting point for having nothing, right? Like, if you have $1,000, it is the equivalent of having zero. Like, is
I
that
think it's
even
helpful
possible?
to I think it's helpful to run through just like the math of the net distributions and impacts. So as an example, a simplified example, consider like a someone with $12,000 and they get a $12,000 UBI. And so now they're up to $24,000. And let's say that prices increase 10%, which would be like a very large increase in prices. That I think that's abnormally large and not realistic. But let's just say that that happens. So now they're spending an extra $2,400 per year on this higher prices, and they're getting $12,000. So you know that $12,000 is higher than $2,400, and so therefore they are a net beneficiary of buying power, even with that. Now there's somebody who exists at the crossover point where let's say you're at $120,000 and your prices have increased 10%. So now you're paying $12,000 more and you're getting the UBI of $12,000, in which case that's the 0 point. So everyone below $120,000 is seeing an increase in their buying power despite a 10% increase in inflation. And then everyone above $120,000 is seeing reduced buying power as a result of that. It's important to think of that as like this higher prices can be this flat line, and it depends, like you have to compare that percentage difference to the absolute amount of the basic income in order to think about that. And I think people too, when they assume and they think, oh, the new zero argument, it kind of just assumes that there's more money chasing the same amount of stuff. But with taxes, this can be entirely neutral so that there isn't any more money at all. It's just that money is in different hands than it would otherwise be. So it's like, you're seeing like say a 25% increase in like the bottom, like first and second quintiles or whatever. And then like the fourth quintile is your neutral, and then your fifth quintile are the ones who are paying more in taxes than getting back. And that's important for people to understand, that I don't think they necessarily assume that when we talk about let's provide everyone a universal basic income. They just kind of immediately jump to, oh, well, that's like if everybody gets it, then there's definitely more money. It's like being rained down from helicopters, and then therefore, of course, inflation will happen.
I think there's something in Josh's question, and not knowing Josh and the sort of wacky sorts of philosophical questions he likes to ask, that is worth addressing in the extreme, which is there a point at which an amount of money is worth nothing? And I guess theoretically, that's at the point where you can't get anything with it. Like, it's worth nothing when you can do nothing, because zero will always be worth
Right.
nothing.
Like a
So
post-apocalyptic environment where you've like got suitcases full of cash
yeah,
and you
so
can't
yeah,
buy anything because what people really want is
like
like alcohol and
the
cigarettes and
Weimar
stuff.
Republic or whatever. Yeah, like if cash is totally useless. So like right now, a basic income of a penny or even maybe a dollar like is essentially worthless. It is essentially zero, right? Because if I have a penny, it's not even worth. Like I would just throw it in the trash can. Like it literally is not worth my energy and time to keep it. So there's
No,
maybe a
there's a
number
penny
where
crisis. Like,
it is
we're
zero.
having problems with the fact that there's so many pennies and it's costing so much to keep them in production. Like,
So if inflation gets so bad that $1,000 doesn't get you like a gumball out of a gumball machine, then yes, then it has basically become worth zero. But that is like many orders of magnitude beyond what we're talking about with this disingenuous like $1,000 will be the new zero. It's like unless they're actually predicting that a salary is going to have to be $100 million a year like for minimum wage, then that's not relevant. That's not real.
yeah.
Right now, if you gave me $50 a month, that would pay. I could go grocery shopping for a month if I was being thrifty. That has real value. That's grocery shopping for a month.
So is this right then? So in order for, how did we lose Conrad? In order for $1,000 to be the new zero, it would also mean $1 million would have to be a new zero. Like money is worthless at that point. In order for money to have some value, then you then have to put that money in order of more money is more valuable. So I don't know. I just want to really like poke a hole in that logic, because I think because that is a very core thing of, at least what we're thinking at Commingle is like even $50 a month is like even any amount of money that is not zero is actually
However,
hugely beneficial, because it gets rid of that concept of being able to.
But that was a big part of our decision making when people are like, why 7%? Right? Because it's like, okay, how much is like if we said 50%, no one's going to sign up for half of their income on this radical new idea because it's way too scary. 7%, if you explain that actually most people will be below 1% if they're even giving. It's like it's within the range people are willing to give to like a charity, right? 5-10%, they tithe. Like it's within expected range, is not too scary. But it's also not 1%, because then the payout's $5, and like, why are people gonna like take a leap of faith for like connecting their bank accounts and all of this stuff, and like the emotional and bandwidth energy to sign up and be on a new app for like if only the people who have no income are going to walk with like $5 a month. And so there really was a calculus we did where like how much is enough to make it worth it, and $50 a month, like we've seen in pilots, is enough. So if we're talking $50 a week, that should have a significant impact and a great place to start without scaring people away. So there really is a math there to think like, when does it really become worth people's time? Because time is valuable as well.
I think this talking about amounts and stuff, I think it's a good opportunity, I think, to get into some of these stories. This was an article on Business Insider, what an extra $500 to $1,000 a month did for 8 families. So this is like 8 anecdotes, like real life stories of how a basic income like impacted these people. And so just gives like a summary here of how like so many pilots are going on over the past 5 years. Pilot programs in 150 cities have been handing out cash. It's in more than that, and there's all sorts of it's various amounts, it's various groups that are being focused on, but these are the stories specifically, and it'd be fun to just go into each of these and we can kind of discuss. I haven't actually read this yet. I wanted to save this until we go through it. So these are just like short story anecdotes of each of these like 8 people. So starting off, Stephanie Bartella, 48, is an administrator at Pierce College and a divorced mother of 4 in Tacoma, Washington. She received $500 a month for 13 months. And she said, before the program, I felt like I was drowning. I worked my butt off and I was barely making it. I had come out of an unhealthy marriage, moved back to Washington to be closer to my family, got my degree. I was able to get a mortgage on a home. I felt like a very fortunate person, and everyone was telling me I was making the right choices. But I was putting my utility bills on a credit card pretty regularly. I was buying the cheap groceries. It was really defeating. Where I felt it the most was always having to say no to my kids. They felt the strain of mom doesn't have enough to do fun stuff. Every little outing, like the movies or the state fair, if you want to join it, it's a big expense. It takes money to participate in society, and you really get left out of a lot of things if you don't have it. I use the guaranteed income to pay down some credit card bills. I buy a little more meat and prepared food items that help save time making dinner. I had a dead tree in my yard, and thank goodness I was able to pay to get it cut down. My neighbors came by and said, "Oh, your yard looks so nice." I gave my family one splurge. My nephew was getting married, and me and my boys got to stay at the same hotel with the rest of the family and enjoy the wedding. By the end of the program, I had a few $100s tucked away. It's not a lot, but it's a little bit of a lifeline. It reminds me, hey, we can get you through this. The thing that I like about this particular story too is just like, she says she splurged on like her nephew got married, and she and her sons got to stay at the same hotel as like the rest of the family. Like that was a quote unquote like splurge. And that's the kind of thing where like we should all be able to do that. Like if your family, if someone's getting married, like it's great to be able to afford to be a part of that. And if you don't have an income, if you don't have a sufficient income, then you can't. And maybe she could have gone anyways, but would have had to stay at like the cheapest place possible, or taken some other option. But here, like the family was able to be together because of that. I just really like that. It's like a simple pro family, pro society kind of
and it
impact.
makes it very real. I have something I want to say about these, but I want to let you get through a couple more that, like, because this is very much like the ones that we saw with Bootstraps and how it affected my thinking. So let's do a few more, and then I have a thought.
MK Jiang, 34, is a partnered mother in Plymouth, Minnesota, who serves as the primary caregiver to her daughter, who has autism. She received $500 monthly for a year. She says, I got the call that I'd been selected not long after my baby, Vera, was born. I almost dropped the phone. I was like, there's a catch, right? And they're like, no strings attached. I was hit by a car toward the end of college, and I have issues with my heart and lungs to this day. I was just walking, and the next thing I knew, I was in a hospital bed, and the doctors were telling me, you were in a coma. You were done for. When COVID-19 hit, I was a successful sports massage therapist, but I had to pause. My doctors were worried about my lungs. I had to be very cautious. Vera is our miracle. My partner and I found out we were pregnant in late 2021. I knew it was going to be a big risk to have a kiddo given my health, but we really wanted to fight for it. We were under so much financial stress. I was on bed rest for the entire third trimester. We were down to one income, and it was just me and my boyfriend living in a $600 a month studio and going to the food pantry. When Vera was born, the guaranteed income sustained us. We used it for diapers and groceries. It was still COVID, so we couldn't have a baby shower. When we moved to Minnesota, it helped us with the U-Haul. As a postpartum mom, I really respected that the money came with no strings attached. Our baby girl was born prematurely by C-section, so my body took on more of a toll. I was able to get a massage for my muscle recovery and then get my toenails done to actually feel like a woman again. If I'm the caregiver, how am I supposed to take care of another if I'm falling apart? I needed self-care so bad at that point. In that one, a couple things really stand out, which is one, just like how impactful cash is versus everything else, that's offered. And so in her case, she's able to use it to pay for a U-Haul, and then just able to pay for a massage. So then, like, there's not like programs. There's not like a federal program for getting a massage or like getting a U-Haul or whatever. And if there if there is, it's probably some crazy thing with a ridiculous number of hoops and stuff. But I also just like
long enough.
right. It's the cheese balancing. And I like the feeling like a woman again aspect of like getting your toenails done. So like that's the kind of thing that's considered a frivolous purchase, from those who are like, oh, you can't use welfare. We have to design these programs that are food vouchers that limit all these things. So we definitely don't want people paying for their toenails to get done. But like, what's wrong with that? How is that if someone feels that they need that in order to feel whole, or in order to like to like have some sense of mental wellness and to be able to actually focus on other things better because of that, then who are we to say that that's like some bad purchase? Another one here, Candace Creel Falcon, 42, is a visual artist and feminist scholar living in rural Minnesota with their wife. They're receiving $500 a month for 5 years. In 2019, after close to a decade of teaching, I decided that the tenured professor lifestyle was not for me. I left to pursue a career as a full-time artist and writer. The number one thing the artists need is time. If you're spending your time chasing and hustling, cobbling together lots of different income streams, that's less time for you to actually make the work. I bring in about $53,000 a year. My wife, Natalie, and I live on 20 acres, and we've been tending to this property since 2017. I have a pretty tight budget. The guaranteed income allowed me to take risks with my artistic business. I rented gallery space in the Twin Cities for $400 per month to get more exposure for my artwork. That was only possible because I had a consistent source of funds coming in. Partway through the program, the government unfroze repayments of student loans. I paid that $549.28 a month out of my main income. The $500 in guaranteed income was my buffer. When that happened, I couldn't afford a whole wall at the gallery, so I downgraded to a shelf for $25 a month. I also used the money to help cover the cost of groceries when my food budget was depleted and to put gas in my tank. The intangible part of guaranteed income was feeling like my work matters in my community and feeling like I'm being supported to do this important creative work. I feel a little bit more confident that I can make it as an independent artist. And in September, the guaranteed income program was extended to 5 years from the original 18 months. So I may end up paying off my student loan debt. I wish all artists who are struggling to make a career from their work could experience this amazing gift.
Yeah. So I've been thinking about this. Like, because we do so much together these days, Scott, it's more thrust into my awareness of like just how much I've sort of stopped giving a shit about the data from pilots that are like white paper sort of data. Like I went through a phase, and that's what brought me in, where it's like, wow, and you know, poaching dropped 95% in Namibia, and like you know, in Manitoba, like domestic violence dropped by this much, and all drinking always goes down. And at a certain point, when we started like really getting to know the stories of the people in the Bootstraps pilot, like I it sort of helped with a deeper understanding for me, at least, or like a perspective on the deeper rules. Like when I was in school for engineering, basically, I remember they gave us crib sheets, right? And some people, like for the tests, and some people would basically write down every single homework question we'd ever had all semester and bring that in and hope like it'll answer the questions on the test. But in reality, in any physics or engineering or whatever class, there's basically like 2 equations you learn in any given semester. And if you understand how those fundamental laws, like thermodynamic laws or whatever they are, sort of like how they work at a very basic level, you can extrapolate to everything else you need. So part of following around 20 bootstrappers for this long and being in the context of thinking about all these things every day, it sort of coalesced into like a more of a fundamental rule about human nature, like what drives people, and like this idea that everybody, when you really connect with them, everyone wants to matter, wants their reason on this earth to make sense, and to have value and to like have control over the world around them, and that is what drives everybody, and everything else arises out of that. Like and so UBI is just similar to other things like universal healthcare, things like that. It is just a freeing of agency to that end, where UBI is just cash, which is power to do whatever you want. And these 3 stories, and I'm sure the other 5, all show a similar trend. Is like all of these people used it to empower the things that they wanted in their life. And what they wanted was to matter, to contribute, whatever. So at a certain point, you know, these 100 pilots come in, and, you know, I listen to the just long enough to be like, does that mesh with, you know, this general law of people that I've come to, or do I need to reassess something? And it always like immediately does. It always immediately is like, yeah, these people are using it for the things that are going to make them matter more in the world. And so like, yeah, that's kind of where I've come to with like the human story side of things, is like an understanding of how just people work, rather than trying to like look at the data here and there, because it all just kind of makes sense holistically at that point.
Yeah. And it makes me wonder, should I cover more of those stories, or should we move on to the results of a new study?
Yeah, now that we've said studies don't mean shit, I do want to call out 1 or 2 things from the live stream chat I just noticed. This guy, Jay Strawdogs, posted a fun quote from D.H. Lawrence that is about what we were talking about before. And so the house came to be haunted by the unspoken phrase, "There must be more money. There must be more money." The children could hear it all the time. And I think that resonates for a lot of people. Like, the main stressor in so many households is like,
Yeah, that's a good quote.
It boils down to money, and that like when we would, as we got through the process of asking people, it starts like, what do you think about UBI? What would it mean in your life? What does it mean in your life? Well, what would it mean if, like, as we get deeper, what would it mean if you had this for the last 10 years? And then eventually it gets to, well, what if your parents had this? Like, and people start to realize so much of my life and my formative years and everywhere that I went comes down to like the environment I was raised in and that scarcity and that constant messaging.
Yeah, that's a great quote. Like, but also like, what is, in this case, they're talking about the house, the actual like house that the family's in. But you could also say like the house is the country, right? Like this is the unspoken phrase that's going throughout all of America is there's got to be more money, And so, how do we address that?
Brian says, when do you go ahead?
I like to.
I was
Go ahead.
moving to the next thing. Brian says, when do you think is the turning point once everything hits the fan? I'm hoping it's in 2025 when we introduce Commingle. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Turning point next year. I just wanted to read. We have to read all 8 of these stories,
We
but
should share the.
I'm just
We should share
kind
the
of
links
skimming
so
through
people
these.
can, because these are very well written, and it's like, it really grounds you in reality in a way that like so much of the other stuff out there doesn't.
Yeah, it's a fun format too. It's just short stories. It's easily
What
digestible.
Outlet posted this or whatever? Like,
It's Business Insider. Okay, so Magdalena Spencer, 32, is a receptionist for the Tulalip tribe's government and a widowed mother of 4 in Tulalip, Washington. She's receiving $1,250 a month for 3 years. So the other ones were $500 a month, and this is $1,250. I like that as just a higher amount. Kind of curious about how she's doing. She says, I gave birth to my son, Emilio, on Christmas Day, 2023. I initially planned on going back to work after 3 months. After being approved for the Guaranteed Income Program in January, I could afford to stay out for 6 months and be okay financially. It had been a difficult couple of years. After my daughter passed away in 2020 at 10 months old, I fell into addiction really bad. I signed my 3 kids over to family members. I got sober in 2022 and was in treatment. At first, I only got visitation with my children. Then I had to adjust to having my kids back after not having them for 2 years. My kids moved home with nothing. I used those first payments, to buy diapers, groceries, new clothes, new bedding. I buy so much, and then they grow. I try to put $100 or $200 to the side and not touch it. When my last vehicle started having mechanical problems, I used that savings to get a new vehicle for $5,000. So we're starting over on savings. At the end of the month, I have that little bit of extra money to take my kids out. Last time we went to the movies and saw Inside Out 2. My 2 oldest have birthdays a few days apart in May, and I used the money for a birthday party. As a single mom, you have to do it all on your own. I feel like I'm very lucky to have this time at home with my children. I'm able to drive the 3 oldest to school every day. We stop for breakfast. I don't have to rush like I do when I'm working, so we get more bonding time. I'm able to stop and pause in moments with my kids to sit down and either correct their behavior or talk with them. So from this particular example, again, it's like this ties into so many of the results we've seen from pilots where, let's say, the mother of a newborn uses it effectively as a way of accomplishing paid maternity leave. Like, she was actually able to focus on being a new mom and being a mom to her existing kids for a longer time instead of like just being forced to immediately go back. And I think that's like an important component of, like an experiment that shows, oh, it turns out that women work less, and like that's a horrible thing. This is the reality of it. Like, that's behind those numbers is, there's still work going on. And how messed up is it that we're the only country in the OECD that has 0 days of paid maternity leave?
There's also this story addresses as well a common thing, which is addiction. And it gives a hint as to why what we see in like the larger, white paper data things is that people tend to get sober and stay sober a lot more when they're getting a basic income, which is like directly counterintuitive to what a lot of people think. It's like because they think of people as addicted people. These are drug addicts, and if you give them money, they're going to use it for the thing that they are, which is drug addiction. But going back to this idea that people want to matter, drug addiction to me is more of like a way to potentially explain it is drug addiction is an escapist coping mechanism for when you don't feel like you have the ability to matter or to succeed or to have agency. So for someone in her situation, she's got 4 children who, if she feels like she has all this responsibility and can't manage it, that's a way to escape that sort of crushing reality. And giving someone like that the ability to have a solid, floor of security is the excuse or the mechanism by which you can be supported when you check back in to that responsibility, to that life, to that purpose, because you're giving her the ability to like see a way through it, to succeed at it, and so all of a sudden she's going to take you up on it, and
Yeah.
that is borne out in all of the pilots by the numbers, but you kind of have to see it with a person first before you realize, oh, we're looking at people, we're not looking at numbers. I can't just make broad statements like this is how addicts work and this is how homeless people work and this is how bankers work. It's like you really have to understand people better before you try to make economic policy.
The we'll end with this next story, just because I also like how this is apparently the RX Kids program in Flint, Michigan. So this is Tatiana Lopez, 39, is a patient representative at a hospital in Flint, Michigan, and a married mother of 3. She received a one-time payment of $1,500, followed by $500 a month for 1 year. My husband and I have our own home, and in June we made our last payment on the 10-year mortgage. But ever since COVID, things weren't so great financially. My husband ended up going part-time. My paycheck is $1,200 a month, and everything has been going up. I used to spend $100 a week on groceries, but now it seems more like $200. I was on a program for our power bill where they lower the total you pay, and your electricity doesn't get shut off. I knew I was going on maternity leave for 12 weeks, so I was trying to save a little bit here and there. With the guaranteed income, I'd paid bills that were past due. I got my car fixed. It was about to be winter here, and I'd been thinking, how am I going to get new tires? I also spent money on my baby, just the necessary items like diapers, and ended up getting him a car seat and a stroller. My 2 older boys really love sports, so I make sure they get what they need. My oldest son, who's 13, is on the basketball team and getting into baseball. My 7-year-old is into basketball. You need certain types of shoes for different sports. I also put myself last, so the one thing I got for myself was a haircut. I'm trying to save some of the money so my kids will have something when they're older, like hopefully for college or money they could use for their future. I wish the payments would last a little bit longer. This program helps women who are struggling to make ends meet. Sometimes you're so drained with bills that it's hard to catch up. So for people who don't know, the really cool thing about this is called the RX Kids program in Flint, Michigan, is that this is a fully universal program in Flint. So if you're a woman in Flint who gets pregnant, you qualify for the program. And that means that you get $1,500 during pregnancy and $500 a month for the next year. This is not a means tested program. There is no work requirements on the program. It's just if you get pregnant, then you get this money to aid in your pregnancy and to help afford that first year. And we know that, this has huge repercussions too. And we should have the enhanced child tax credit that effectively, does this, where it would be, that was $250 per month to $300 per month. I guess would be the first 6 years, it was $300 per month for, kids under age 6. We know this works, and we know that the return on investment is huge. I just love that this program, because it even utilizes some of the TANF block grant. So this is even like using TANF in a better way by kind of converting what is like a really ridiculously means tested program that hardly reaches anybody, and kind of converts at least some of that block grant into a fully universal program for all, pregnant moms and babies in their first year.
Yeah,
Okay, so
if you're looking for a pro-life policy, this is
yeah,
probably the
yeah,
one to get.
legitimately pro-life. So the next thing, so we'll go from those anecdotes fittingly to a new study. And so this paper just came out recently. It's household responses to guaranteed income, experimental evidence from Compton, California. Here's the abstract. We study the effects of a 2-year unconditional cash transfer program for low-income households in Compton, California between 2021 and 2023. 695 households were randomly assigned to receive transfers averaging around $500 per month over a 2-year period, with 1,402 households randomly assigned to a control group. To measure the impact of transfer frequency, half of the recipients were paid twice per month, and the other half received quarterly transfers. We surveyed 1,074 respondents 18 months after the beginning of transfers. Receiving guaranteed income had no impact on the labor supply of full-time workers, but part-time workers at baseline had lower labor market participation by 13 percentage points. Income, excluding the transfer, was reduced by $333 per month on average relative to control households, and expenditures were reduced by $302 per month. At the same time, average non-housing debt balances declined by $2,190 over 18 months relative to the control group, although the drop is not statistically significant. We find a significant improvement in housing security, but no overall effects on indices of psychological and financial well-being. The recipients of twice monthly transfers were more likely to own a car, had lower credit card debt, and greater food security than recipients of quarterly transfers, but otherwise transfer frequency had little impact. Compared to male recipients, female recipients reported a greater increase in financial security and a smaller reduction in earned income and expenditures. So what's interesting about this experiment that's different than so many other experiments is this actually tested differences in frequency. Usually these are a monthly amount, and this was actually testing, let's do it once every 2 weeks instead of monthly, and also let's compare that to once every 3 months. And it turns out that there were kind of like a few better outcomes for the twice a month, but not all that different. So, if we were to do a UBI that was quarterly, it would still have positive outcomes, of course. But if you wanted to maximize those positive outcomes, it probably makes more sense, to do monthly or, twice a month. It's just the more regular it is, the more frequent it is, it's like the better it helps for just ways that people would like to use it, like
it's more useful.
basis.
We decided to do it weekly based on the principle that this is about knowing that everyone's okay all the time. Like, I imagine the scenario of, like, I was in New York, and like I see a lot of people homeless on the street. If we've got a quarterly program and I see someone asking for change on the street, and I know the next check isn't coming for 2.5 months, that person could really need help. Like, if they had a big expense and lost it, or they blew it, or whatever, they're in trouble. Whereas if I know it's coming next week, then it's like, okay, how do we get you to next week? Or like, let's talk about like what went wrong and strategize or whatever. And what we found is, like, we were asking our participants this in general, and sometimes, they had situations where they'd be like, well, I don't need it to come in every week. Monthly would be fine. It goes more with my bills, or I'd like it in bigger chunks so I can make bigger investments and budget better. Or I like it weekly. In general, it seemed like the people in more dire circumstances, more immediate, urgent circumstances, benefited more from weekly because things were happening fast-paced. And then as they got more and more comfortable, they could let it accrue. They could basically treat it like it was coming in monthly, not be so worried about having it right then and there. In terms of like a federal policy, for me, it's like whichever way you go, I would imagine that some like private industry solutions could pop up to like give people choices about how they receive it. So like if it's, you know, yearly or quarterly, like some bank would be happy to like hold it earning interest and only give it to you in increments. Or if it's weekly, it could be like it goes weekly into some bank or service and then lets you access it once a month or directs it towards your landlord or whatever you want. My preference would be the higher frequency, the better, for that reason I said before, which is like I want to know someone on the street isn't potentially waiting a year or 3 months or whatever for their next installment if they haven't been signed up for one of these things or there isn't a solution for them. Like I want to know like the people in the more urgent situations are more catered to and everyone else can sort of adapt in like some sort of free market way.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
frequency question is actually it's kind of a big part of commingling, that we're a lot of the way that the money is generated takes advantage of these sort of discrepancies and when people get paid, and like it sort of uses this diversity of need and the differences in when income is coming in and when you actually need money to sort of like generate extra money on top of that. So.
I read through this whole study and took out some excerpts that I wanted to share. I share these on Blue Sky already, and so I just wanted to go through those. And first of all, here's what I wrote on Blue Sky. New study out. This one tested quarterly versus biweekly cash. The amount was $500 per month for 2 years. 695 people got the money. Full-time labor didn't decrease. Part-time did on average. Effects varied by gender. Single mothers worked far more. Men who got it reduced their abuse of women by 36 percentage points, and credit card debt fell. So then here are the excerpts. In exploratory analyses, we find notable differences when comparing single mother recipients, a group that comprises 22% of the sample and which experiences a high rate of poverty, to the rest of the sample. The treatment effect on weekly hours of work is plus 6.4 hours among single mothers. These results echo Eisen, Lieben, and Meyer and Rosenbaum, who found positive labor supply effects of 1987 EITC expansions on single mothers relative to single women without children. Consistent with the positive labor supply effects among single mothers, we estimated an impact of $831 on income in this group, including the transfer, which is larger than the size of the cash transfer itself. The increase in weekly hours worked is plus 15.7 hours among those receiving quarterly transfers, and their income is $1,002 higher than the relevant controls. So the overall finding, the average, was that like part-time employment went down. And here, if you just looked at single mothers, then employment actually went up quite a bit, and it went up even more for quarterly transfers, which was just interesting too. But that's like an example of how, you know, you're going to see different impacts depending on different groups. And also interesting, like a lot of times, you know, if you're looking at parents, then maybe hours or days employed will go down in those groups. But then specifically here for single mothers, so there wasn't another partner in the household, then employment actually went up quite a bit, which points to that the income actually helped, say, pay for childcare or something, which then greatly enabled them to increase their income thanks to that. And that was like the choice that they made.
You know, immediate stuff like, you know, that those parent working hours go down, and you might also see pretty short-term outcomes like school performance goes up, and then long-term outcomes like 20 years later the crime rate is lower. You know, like there's definitely a very tangled web of effects, or it's like a ripple effect, you know, because it, like I said before, when you think about like, what if my parents had this? Think back on all the times they fought about money, or like the things you didn't get to do, or like differences between families, or just how it affected every moment of your life. You got to realize that you'd be a very different person if something that fundamental was changed. And so what does society look like if everyone's a very different person.
Yeah. Speaking of like different people too, like this impact really stood out to me. This was our list randomization results suggest that intimate partner violence is significantly reduced in households where the man received the transfer, with a 36 percentage point reduction in the likelihood of any episodes, and to a lesser extent in households where the woman received the transfer, 16 percentage points not significant. The result is also reflected in direct reports of intimate partner violence. We've seen this before in multiple experiments where intimate partner violence is reduced by basic income. What's interesting to me that stands out from this one is that it's the bigger impact was when the man got it. So, usually in like a true universal basic income, everyone in the household gets it, both husband, wife, and there's a component for kids, whatever. Like in that household, everyone would get it. But in here, it's just like one person in the household is getting it. And so if the man got it, then it like really dramatically reduced spousal abuse, partner abuse. And to me that points to like this, the stress impact. We know that economic insecurity and like can lead to so much like just fighting with your partner. It's not even about abuse, but like a lot of drama ensues from just concerns about money. And so if you have that like base underneath you, then it's crazy to think that you could actually just so quickly reduce partner abuse through this basic income floor by, in this case, it was 36 percentage point reduction. That's just
That's a stat.
Really impressive.
That stat that we talk about sometimes, 95% of domestic violence cases involve financial abuse, is about as clear cut as any I can think of. It sort of shocked me, where it's like, that very specifically says if the woman has money, she doesn't stay, or whoever is being abused, I guess. They just don't stay for it, which is also in contradiction to the like the fears in the 60s and 70s of like, oh, this is breaking up marriages. And it's like, well, maybe those are the ones that needed to break up.
Yeah. Although also in that time, it wasn't that they were actually leaving the marriages. That was a statistical mistake. But then what they looked at that later, and they found too that even though like that women didn't exit marriages to some increased degree, it did improve relationships, and because of this like greater bargaining power. So if you're in an abusive relationship and you get a basic income, then some of those people are going to exit those relationships because they finally can, and then others are going, because of that power, it's going to change the dynamic of that relationship, and so it could actually become a healthy relationship once one of the people being abused has the ability to say, look, if you keep this up, I'm
we
leaving.
Saw also like very nuanced versions of this that I won't get into the spoilers and stuff, but like how it changed relationships within that, like allowed relationships to happen. Like I just got a wedding invite from one of the bootstrappers that wouldn't have happened, and I'm excited to go to it. But it's like the sort of stuff you wouldn't expect, right? Like subtle shifts in power dynamics, and I think that's a very important part of why the design and what a failing of like a lot of the pilots that have gone on is that it has to be a person is a person, where the woman gets it, the man gets it, or what each partner gets it as an individual, so that they have the freedom to express themselves and their basic income outside of the context of like, you are the relationship, you are the household, and that it does let relationships break up if they need to break up, but it also does let relationships heal if they need to heal, because it gives everyone like some footing in the power dynamic struggle, where so like it rebalances out, and like if that creates a system where it's healthier, they become healthier, then great. If it sort of illuminates a system, or like mitigates a situation where the power dynamic is going to keep existing for some unhealthy reason, then it allows the person to get away.
Yep. The next excerpt two is so this pilot was another one of those that was impacted by COVID, the timing of it. So It says the heterogeneous effects suggest that one advantage of cash transfers is that households may pursue different strategies to recover from the shock of the pandemic, with some focusing on debt reduction and others on the recovery of pre-pandemic consumption levels or spending time with family. E.g., female labor market participation declined by 6 percentage points, and observe a reduction in expenditures in elderly care, childcare, and transportation. More broadly, the indication of decreases in household debt, although not statistically significant, suggests that a focus on consumption as the bottom line measure for the welfare impact of cash transfers may be overly narrow. So in here, it's just, the timing of it, people are able to use this to actually, focus on debt reduction. And so if like you just look at the data, like in the abstract pointed out that that spending levels went down, but spending levels went down because people are actually paying off their debts and building up savings, which is what they felt was the right thing to do in this particular
it
time.
does sort of beg the questions that have never been answered by these pilots, which is like, so what is the order of operation of building out of, precarity, and which can be from like, I'm in a little bit of debt to I have intergenerational trauma. So like part of the reason we chose to do a 2.5-year pilot, originally 2 years for bootstraps, was felt like 1 year you could maybe stop the bleeding, like kind of get out of the most disastrous of your debts and like catch up a little. And then year 2, maybe you start making some moves. We were surprised at how quickly people actually started making moves. But the question is, like, we were a 2-year pilot. These are like 2 to 5 year pilots or 18-month pilots or whatever. But actually, what does it look like when people are going to get it for the rest of their lives? They know they're going to get it for the rest of their lives. They can plan around that. And so what does it look like in their lives? But then what does it look like in the next generation's lives? Like everything, like how do you understand what could happen in the current generation and in the current decade versus, current generation, decades down the line, and future generations? I think there's so much that we can't really know. We can speculate about, but we're basically introducing a world that's so much different than anything we've ever known. We have to come at it with a certain amount of humility, which is why I'm really excited to like finally be trying to make a permanent version of UBI happen. Like, so we can keep measuring it over time in a way that,
Yeah. Here's the final part that I wanted to emphasize from this study. And this was, again, this is the hours worked. So the second row shows weekly hours worked. There's no statistical difference between males and females, with a small negative treatment effect for females and a small positive treatment effect for males. The third row gives treatment effects on weekly labor supply and hours conditional on working. Column 4 shows that working female recipients increase their hours by 2.73 on average. In contrast, the treatment effect for men is small and not statistically significant, consistent with a lack of impact of male labor force participation. So, like overall, men were not impacted at all by this. They didn't really drop out of the labor force at all. They didn't reduce their hours at all. It was pretty unchanged. And then the difference was with women. And so some women did drop out of the labor force. And, you can see that as, focusing on unpaid care. And then the women who stayed in the labor force, they actually increased their hours worked. So it's like you can see that as women making the choice that was best for them of either working at home in an unpaid way or being empowered to work in the labor market to a greater degree than they were able to otherwise, likely because, again, maybe they weren't able to afford childcare, or for whatever reason that they were being held back from working as much as they wanted to. So this is like, it shows that freedom of being able to choose, and also it helps show there's unpaid work and paid work, and so if you look at an experimental result that says hours per year or whatever dropped, you always have to look into, well, what does that mean? Like, is there a gender difference? Is there an age difference? And what is that telling us?
Yeah, I also, one thing I just want to point out is a linguistic thing. We keep saying labor force here, and it kind of goes along with my like one of my objectives is to reclaim the idea of work, like labor force as opposed to workforce, where like dropping out of the labor force where you have an employer or something doesn't mean you're dropping out of the workforce. Like you're doing your life is work, caregiving is work, all of it is work that we should acknowledge as work. And that would be a great way to just start changing the narrative is these people did not leave the workforce, they left the labor force. And just to very specifically and clearly make that point.
Josh, you need to head out now, right?
Yes, indeed.
We're going to keep
Feel
going
free to
for a
carry
bit.
on. All right, carry on
But
into
yeah,
the
thanks
night.
for being with us, Josh.
Make it a marathon. All right.
All right, bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Okay, so since we're talking about dropping out of the labor force, let's cover this, which caused like quite a stir on social media and stuff, which is these "Stop Hiring Humans" billboards.
Yeah,
in San
catch me up
Francisco.
on this one too, like the other thing.
Yeah, so these were billboards created by this company named Artisan, and they all these boards like "Stop Hiring Humans."
That one on the bottom left is like
hire
there's
artisans,
some level
not
of
humans.
clever going on. I have to like analyze it for a while because it's misspelling hiring. Is this implying that a human made this billboard and that an AI would have done it better or something?
Yeah, so I'll read a little bit about this because this gets into like the details and their strategy and stuff, and it was pretty clever. So yeah, to get people up to date. So here's what they said. This was actually written by the company who did this. When you drive around San Francisco, you see hundreds of tech billboards all competing for your attention, and most blur together in a sea of generic messaging about AI, cloud computing, enterprise solutions. It's undisputedly boring. When we decided to launch our own outdoor campaign at Artisan, we knew we needed something different, something that would stand out, something provocative. What we didn't know was that our controversial approach would lead to tens of millions of impressions, thousands of death threats, hundreds of articles, and our biggest growth months ever. Was it worth it? Yes. The strategy behind the controversy. Let's see. We wanted everyone to know who we were and to think of Artisan when they hear AI employee, so billboards seemed like our best bet. We knew that if we made the billboards as vanilla as everybody else's, nobody would care. We'd spend hundreds of thousands and get nothing in return. We spent days brainstorming the campaign messaging. We wanted to draw eyes and spark interest, wanted to cause intrigue with our target market while driving a bit of rage with the wider public. The messaging we came up with was simple but provocative. Stop hiring humans. We complemented our core tagline with phrases like artisans won't complain about work-life balance. Humans are so 2023. Artisans won't come into work hungover. Hire artisans, not humans. And the era of AI employees is here, paired with the human appearance of our AI SDR, Ava. And then we waited. The first billboard that went up was on the way up to the city from SFO. It read, "Stop hiring humans." And yes, the spelling mistake was human error. We timed it so that it went up on the same day as our sponsorship of 30 booth at TechCrunch Disrupt. And boom, it started with a single tweet. Did I really just see a billboard that said "Stop hiring humans" on the way from SFO airport to the city? And then, it shows, a bunch of people reacting to it, and some of the various tweets and stuff about this, like highly upvoted everywhere. I saw like so many different.
I think it's very bold, and like all the thousands of death threats. I understand like why that's happening, and I think they knew they were kind of signing up for it. To me, it's like a very like in terms of corporate responsibility, they did this knowingly. It feels like they're basically stirring the pot and asking for this trouble so that they can make the AI that's coming accountable, right? It's like it's incredibly refreshing to have them say, "This is what we're doing," and put it all out there, and even do it in a way that's extra shocking, so that people have to face it, as opposed to all these other ones that are like buried in euphemisms about efficiency and whatever, and just kind of like ignoring all the people that are going to lose their jobs and not talking about it. This is bringing that front and center and sort of like taking the blowback up, like taking it like as the spokesperson of it. So that's both very smart business wise, but also it forces everyone to get real about what's happening. So it kind of pushes every other business in the industry into a place of having to acknowledge this and compete with it. To me, it seems pretty brilliant. I don't know if like they have a good product or anything, but good marketing.
Right. I liked how they ended this blog post too. The truth is, we love humans. They said we don't actually want people to stop hiring humans. We're actively hiring across all roles. I don't actually think AI is dystopian. The real goal for us is to automate the work that humans don't enjoy and to make every job more human. Nobody wants to spend 8 hours a day researching people and writing outbound emails, so we built Ava to do it for them. In the long run, the Stop Hiring Humans campaign tagline will have more merit. Inevitably, as more and more human productivity is taken over by AI, we should first see a 4-day work week. Eventually, we should live in a world where everyone gets UBI. Productivity is driven entirely by robots. We're all free to do whatever we want, and you can truly stop hiring humans. But today is not that day. In my opinion, that day will in fact be
A little
utopia.
bit of the Elon's,
Shout out to our awesome
stuff,
team.
where it's like UBI once we get to utopia, which is like, that's a little.
Yeah, yeah. It's unfortunate that they don't look at us as we should actually be doing this right now, because then maybe people wouldn't be like
Yeah,
panicking and
it's
getting really
transition
pissed
era. You
off
can't. Yeah,
about
and we
what we're
have
trying
to
to
do
do.
this. Like, we should first see a 4-day week and UBI. Or, I mean, I feel like a 4-day week doesn't necessarily need to be legislated so much as like a lot of these things arise out of UBI, where people make the choices to work 4 days, or companies start experimenting with these policies. But UBI serves as that foundational sort of framework upon which these other things can more easily happen, because it's like a lubricant for change, like the ability to get out of, I guess it's similar to what we were talking about before, the solidified beliefs or whatever they were. Like, we have that in terms of like how our society works. Like, our society has these solidified, codified beliefs that we're resistant to change, and our bandwidth is tapped and everything. But if you give everyone a basic income and you give society a basic income, then all of a sudden we're loosened up a little to be open and imaginative and play more.
So there's a few more news pieces I want to like kind of lightning our way through them, since we only have really a few more minutes to get through. So we'll just I'm just going to cover some quick headlines, and we can do like some closing discussion after like the headlines are done. So just kind of ripping through these. All right. So in the Philippines, Chavit Singson wants universal basic income in the Philippines of elected senator. So just quick intro to people. This is someone who's very well known in the Philippines. He's running for senator. He's been in like business and politics there for like decades. He's highly respected as being like a businessman there in the Philippines. He's not technically a billionaire, but he's basically a billionaire in the Philippines, as being like one of the absolute richest people there. And he's running on a small UBI. Like, he supports UBI, and he thinks it'd be good for the Philippines, and he wants a fully universal, like small amount for everybody. So, to me, I think that's a really positive development to see. And then, so we move over to Bangladesh. This is an article, the Daily Star, some thoughts on universal basic income in Bangladesh. This is kind of just reads as like your typical op-ed, but it's written by someone at the UN, with the UNDP. And here it ends with this, this in the final paragraph here, I think is the lead. It says, finally, it's good to know that, like other relevant countries, the UBI proposal is focusing on it first as a program on a limited scale and coverage. A proposal has been made to roll it out in 11 most poverty vulnerable districts in the country. This is a prudent and a pragmatic approach. If on monitoring and evaluation it seems promising, the UBI program can then be scaled up nationally and sustained. So this appears to be that there's like a pilot proposal there in Bangladesh to do like 11 different sites and see how it goes. So we'll
I have a very
see what
quick
happens
question on
there.
this that I have to call out, not about the article. As you're scrolling up and down that little yellow box that says "no meaning found," What is that? Is that like a dig by whatever AI you have going, like, or something? Like, just what was that?
I think I must have like clicked on a
Oh,
word
okay.
or like a
Like a
partial word,
Filipino
and
word,
it
and
came
your
up.
computer
Yeah,
didn't recognize it. Okay.
that's funny. Let's see. So a couple other quick things. I thought this was funny. This was Biden says that he was stupid not to sign COVID stimulus checks like Trump
Yep.
did.
There was a lot of
So
dumb choices around all of
yeah,
that.
that's
He was
entirely
stupid
true.
to reduce them
Yeah,
from the 2008 promised to, like, oh, well, you already got 600. Well, I was counting that, so here's 1,400. He was stupid not to do it
yeah.
monthly, or they, whatever, were stupid. And they were stupid to let the child tax credit end. They were stupid to do it all with unemployment. Like, this is at least one admission, but it's falling far too short.
And this ties in with this other piece of news. And so this is from New York, where the governor there in New York plans to send out $300 payments. This needs to be approved by the New York State House, but if approved, and $300 would go to every individual making under $150,000, and $500 will go to all households making less than $300,000.
Yay.
So, the annoying part is that this is means tested. So, this is excluding those earning greater than that amount. The annoying part is that this is not per person. Like, why they just don't do to every individual, and instead they decide that you get $500 for being, let's say, a married couple, instead of $600 for being two individuals in a household that are unmarried.
I wonder if it's just
like,
the
that's
difficulty
ridiculous.
of like looking at people's taxes. If, like, so Dea and I filed jointly. We're in New York, so we're gonna get that sweet 500.
Well, just give you two
Yeah, but
$300
like
amounts.
we file our incomes as one glob. So yeah, they could take that and say, well, it's under 300,000. We're going to give you each 300 or something like that.
No, they should
right,
give you
each
600.
300,
Like,
separately.
you were married filing jointly. Give you $300 times two. Like,
Yeah.
it annoys me when there's a reduced amount for a
Right.
total household instead of just
But
treating everyone as
what would they
as an
do if there was
individual.
like $150,000? I mean, this is why you get rid of the limits. But if it was 150,000
Right.
and $300,000 limits, where what if I make 50,000 and she makes 180,000? Then like, how do they do that? But we're both together below 300. Like, there's strong reasons to get rid of all this nonsense.
Right.
I wonder if
Yeah.
I'm going to get to see her signature on it.
But aside from those,
Kathy gonna, what's her signature
Right.
look like?
Aside from those problems and joking about the signature, I think this leads into this I would say, like, rising popularity of cash transfers. Like, the stimulus payments were extremely popular, to the point where Biden is even regretting not having leaned into them. And you've got, like, here, this is another example of doing this, but also we're seeing this in Canada too, where you've got, like, Doug Ford in Ontario, we talked about before. He's going to do a fully universal payment like this. And you've got, like, the I think Trudeau is talking about doing something similar to this. Like, we're just seeing more and more of this kind of thing because it's popular. Like, politicians are learning that it's popular to send money to people.
And there actually is a check up in the corner of this with Kathy's signature, which I gotta say is a little bit of a milk toast signature. Right. I was looking for something more jaggedy or something like that from Kathy, but I'll cash it. I'll cash that check.
Okay, so another quick piece of news. This is in the annoying side. We've talked about this before, how the Attorney General in Texas, Ken Paxton, sued to stop the basic income pilot in Harris County and won. So then they were forced to change the program. The complaint was that public money was being used in, like, an unconditional cash way. So they basically converted it to a SNAP program, so, like, they were given it, this is on cards, and they can only use it like EBT on, like, specific things. So it was no longer cash. This was limited to basically approved of things for the program. And yet, again, Ken Paxton has sued to stop it. So at this point, it's like, what are you even arguing now? Are you saying SNAP is an illegal program, that it's unconstitutional. Like it gets into a messy area here where they hate like the idea of basic income pilots so much that they're even going after programs that aren't even
Well, I
basic
don't
income.
think that's inconsistent.
Like that's
I feel like
ridiculous.
that's what we were talking about before, where, you know, if everyone should be able to acknowledge that welfare as we know it sucks, which includes SNAP. But the general answer is, so we shouldn't do anything for anybody, which is, I mean, basically he's like walking down that path. And the Democratic general answer is,
Yeah.
well, we have to cling to welfare because that's the only thing we can imagine. Yeah. So I don't find that surprising at all, that he's just knocking everything down that is any sort of help to anybody.
Yeah, and it's really it's kind of bearing what they're actually doing. You know, like they're making up excuses every time that they take issues with certain things, and what they really want to do is just like
But
not help anybody. And so yeah, in that
the only way
in that way
the
they're
only
like being
way to
more honest.
get rid of their ability to make excuses is to get rid of this means testing and targeting, because that's what they're essentially basing their legal arguments on for both of them. Is like, so if you like, I'd be curious to see what their excuse is to try to block an actual universal program, and I would imagine it would be what we've seen before, which is disingenuously pretend that it's the same as a welfare program as we know it.
Yeah. Or imagine if like Texas, if they had been smart about this and designed a pilot that went after only like veterans. And so, would they have gone after this and said, "Oh no, this is wrong. Federal money, shouldn't be used to help veterans." Like they can't do that. But in this, they could, because they were focusing on those in poverty or like low income. One more thing, or two more things left. This one is from OxFam. This is similar to like the USAID news that we shared in our last episode. And so this is OxFam International. This is OxFam America specifically. Released this like pro basic income briefing paper. And they said guaranteed income can dramatically reduce poverty and inequality, advance gender and racial justice, and support workers by providing direct cash assistance without onerous conditions or eligibility requirements. It can help create a more equitable future. Oxfam America recognizes the human right to an adequate standard of living. To fulfill this right and address inequality, policymakers should support local guaranteed income initiatives and work toward a federal income guarantee. By providing unconditional cash transfers, a guaranteed income would represent a sharp break from the punitive, highly conditional, and inadequate safety net programs that allow poverty and extreme inequality to persist. It can break down the structural barriers that perpetuate racial and gender disparities and help create a more just economy. So for those who don't know, Oxfam is a British-founded confederation of 21 independent non-governmental organizations focusing on the alleviation of global poverty, founded in 1942. So it's a very large international, network. And to have them, coming out in support of basic income, them being called, guaranteed income pilots, and actually pushing for federal programs, I think that's a great, a very positive development.
It sort of made me remember like one of my old grievances that I would love if in this next wave of the UBI movement that we're trying to make happen, we could also reclaim the term guaranteed income. Because I'm still so bitter about how guaranteed income, which I associate with a term that like Martin Luther King used to describe something that was essentially universalist, Big Tent.
Right, it was universal.
And they're using that terminology not only to nod to his theoretical support of this, but also to differentiate itself from UBI. I would love to get to a place where it's more broadly accepted that universality should be baked into any of these things because it's smarter. And then we can have the argument, do we call it universal guaranteed income or dividends or whatever, but take back the idea of guaranteed income and reinsert universality into all the iterations of it as like, this is the part that we should all agree on, is that it should be universal.
Yeah, like we should tear down means testing as being
and
something
I
to
hate
go
that
after.
That's what it has
okay,
become, that the word has been sort of tainted.
Yeah. Final bit I wanted to include. So this isn't This is another thing that's not directly related to UBI, but definitely indirectly related to UBI. And I find this a pretty exciting development. So this is out of Spokane, Washington, which actually happens to be my hometown. I went to junior high and high school there, and so here's the news out of Spokane, Washington.
Spokane City Council wants to spur growth in the city. And to do that, it's exploring the idea of moving on from property taxes and adopting a land value tax model instead. Marissa Rio tells us how your taxes would change.
Imagine owning a fourplex like this one right here on East Wellesley and paying about 10 times more in taxes than the empty lot directly behind you. That's the reality of our property taxes.
If a developer comes in and fixes up a vacant property, or if actually a homeowner even remodels their house, they're actually penalized for that because it increases the total value of their property.
That's why Spokane City Council is exploring taxing the land itself instead.
What land value tax would do is kind of even out the property taxes that different lots pay and make it so that we're not incentivizing vacant lots and we're not punishing investment.
The hope is that by taking on a land value tax model, the city would spur growth. The reason being is because growth would now be incentivized. For example, under a land value tax model, a place as big as the Davenport here would now pay less in taxes. Taxes for parking lots and vacant lots would increase. While this all sounds great, the Spokane County assessor foresees possible issues.
It really goes against state law as it's currently written. Not that that couldn't be changed, but as it's currently written.
City Council is currently working on getting legislation approved so that it can launch a land value tax pilot program. A special taxing district would be created for a certain area of the city so officials could test the tax model out and see if it makes a difference. In Spokane, Marissa Rio, 4 News Now.
Yeah.
Yeah, super exciting.
It's another, they don't mention anything about UBI in this, but it's like a lot of times land value tax and UBI are like together in people's minds just because they're both, for me, fucking obvious, like better incentive structures. And also a land value tax is a good answer to what's one way we can fund a UBI. Like if it's a source of revenue and taxation, then one of the places that eventually we should always consider putting that revenue towards UBI dividends. And if they're coupled like that, then all of a sudden you have like a self-correcting mechanism for like not just speculation on empty land and whatever, but also landlords raising rent and stuff like that.
Yeah, like if the thing that is really exciting to me too about a land value tax pilot is that it gets people thinking in those areas about like a fully universal basic income. You know, like if you do a land value tax in Spokane, then suddenly you can do a Spokane-wide basic income. You could just do it would be an LVT dividend, and it could actually be fully universal. And it makes sense to do it that way because otherwise, you know, you want to make sure that you're like not hurting those who like own their home and live in their home. What you want is like in that particular, like for renters, they would enjoy the full amount of the basic income. And for those who own their home and just live there and that's the only thing they have, then that's kind of neutral. So they're not seeing a big tax increase because the UBI helps offset that. And then really you're just seeing a tax increase on those who own multiple homes and who own these vacant lots and stuff who are refusing to build up, and just like all the incentives are aligned. And hopefully a successful land value tax pilot could encourage other cities and even states to change to an LVT model, and then suddenly an LVT dividend / UBI just makes so much more sense and it's so much more doable.
It's also good for renters to have all the incentives be towards like fixing up your property is a good thing, right? Where a lot of, like we're seeing this up in my town in upstate New York, where I went to a meeting and people were talking about how like a lot of the people renting are dealing with the fact that the landlords are basically people who own a bunch of places who are from out of town or even out of the country. They never fix anything. There's like extra fires and hazards and things like that because they're not incentivized to. And if they fix these things, they might actually face a larger tax burden just because they made their place nicer and safer. Like all of the way the current property taxes work is just nonsensical in my mind. And so this is a good shift that also, I think you're right, it opens up sort of an intuitive, like, well, we're charging based on land, and land is the thing that's really hard to imagine being out of the commons. So like it becomes easier to push forward an idea that some percentage of that revenue should go to everybody, just like Alaska dividend or something.
Yep. And yeah, we've reached the end of the show. Thank you all for joining us today. You know, wish you all happy holidays, Merry Christmas. We will see you all
Happy
next
Hanukkah,
year.
which starts on Christmas.
Happy Hanukkah, everything
Kwanzaa,
else.
which I think I had a roommate who
Kwanzaa.
celebrated Kwanzaa, and I'm like, that might be the coolest one, actually. Like, really good messaging. And I like the colors, you know. Sorry, we're inclusive
Yeah,
here.
I hope everyone enjoys their family time celebrating whatever they want to
And
celebrate.
if you don't have family and the holidays suck,
here
we
at
love
the end
you.
of the year.
And, we're trying to,
Yeah.
we care about you.
Yeah. And with that, yeah, we wish you all the, happy end of the year and happy 2025. It's going to be quite a year next
Yeah.
year. And we'll
This
see
is
you in
our year,
2025.
guys.
All right. Bye, everyone.